Heath Ledger's Joker versus Tom Hardy's Bane. Which of these Nolan-verse villains would you regard as more evil? Let's begin with their backgrounds and their underlying worldviews. For the Joker, there remains a shroud of mystery surrounding his origins. We can't really know for sure, as he constantly changes his story, and the film offers nothing concrete, such as a flashback on which we can rest our conclusions. But for the most part, some have speculated on the Joker's origins based on his own verbal recounts. And those speculations include the following. First, that perhaps in his past life the Joker had an abusive father, given the hatred of him he mentions here. Second, he might have had an eventful encounter with the mob, one that possibly resulted in his disfiguration and the death of his wife. And third, the Joker might be someone with a military background given his proficiency with firearms and explosives, and it's possible that he could have gotten his facial scars here instead of at the hands of the mob. Due to the suffering he underwent from these unfortunate life experiences, the Joker has a tainted worldview, believing that deep down in the depths of human consciousness lies a moral depravity, and that when push comes to shove, they would abandon all virtue for the sake of their own well-being. Seeking to validate this worldview and spread his suffering to others, the Joker is on a mission to prove that everyone is as depraved as he is, which he attempts by setting up situations that could potentially bring out the worst in them, all while he cackles gleefully as he makes Gotham his playground. As for Bane, he was born into tragedy, into a prison in a more ancient part of the world. What doesn't get highlighted enough is the fact that since Bane was born in prison, that would mean his mother was also in prison. Now, we don't see Bane's mother in the flashbacks, but it's likely that she has passed on, as a woman of childbearing age in a barbaric prison is unlikely to have a high chance of survival, as was the case with Talia's mother. Given that Bane knew the horrors of what was in store for Talia when the prisoners found out she was a girl, we can speculate that Bane knew this because of his first-hand experience with what happened with his own mother. So, right from the start, Bane was born into an environment of evil. He was a victim of injustice, who had to quickly learn to fend for himself in a world where the only way to survive is to take by force. After his release from the pit, Bane is driven by revenge, but this revenge is rooted in his loyalty to Ra's and his love for Talia. So, in a sense, Bane's worldview is that loyalty and affection for the people he cares about is of greater importance than preserving human lives, especially those who have already been condemned to death by his mentor. So, in comparing the motivations of the Joker and Bane, we have a desire to bring out the worst in others compared to killing for the sake of loyalty and love. Neither one of them are justifiable, but in this regard, I'd say that Joker's motivating principle and worldview is more sinister than that of Bane's. The actions of Bane would result in the death of his victims, but for the Joker, in his mind, his ideal outcome would be for his victims to become another version of him, fellow agents of chaos, spreading more misery onto others, and continuing the vicious cycle. There are some fates worse than death, so the question becomes, which is more terrible, to simply die at the hands of Bane, or to live as a monster with a moral vacuum like the Joker? The latter is the end goal for the Joker, and I'd say that's a more sinister motivation compared to Bane's. Bane ends the physical life of a person, but the Joker seeks to destroy every semblance of your past self and everything your soul once stood for. So, in terms of their motivations alone, I'd say the Joker comes out as the more evil one. Next, we can move on to their methods. For the Joker, the two recurring methods he uses are making threats and taking hostages, all with the aim of spreading fear, chaos, and deception. What he lacks in physical prowess, he makes up for with intricate planning and always having a backup plan. The Joker frequently plays mind games with the heroes of Gotham, and this makes him especially tricky to deal with and difficult to predict. A particularly heinous method that deserves mentioning is the Joker's exploitation of the mentally ill for his nefarious purposes. Intellectually unsound people like Thomas Schiff, who cannot reason from a rational mind, and more prone to the manipulation of someone as shrewd as the Clown Prince of Crime. In his attempt to bring out the worst in others, the Joker seeks to inflict suffering on his victims, either through putting their lives in jeopardy or targeting the people that his victims hold dear. As for Bane, the main method that accounts for his success would be taking control of the resources of others, whether it's the League of Shadows from Talia or defrauding the stock exchange to seize control of Wayne Enterprises, which then gave him the nuclear reactor. There is some stealth and deception as well, but whenever the situation allows it, he defaults to a more brute force approach, supported by his army of mercenaries. What's particularly egregious is his employment of underaged adolescents from the boys' home, some of whom end up deceased at Gotham River. Beyond that, a critical aspect of Bane's method for revenge against Bruce needs to be highlighted, and that is his notion of hope and despair. Bane isn't just content to cause the deaths of his enemies, a punishment which he deems too light. Rather, he deliberately prolongs their suffering to maximize their pain. Not a physical affliction, but one of mental anguish, through providing false hope that cannot be attained. Ultimately, this becomes his undoing, as it allowed Bruce to recover and Gotham to regroup, but the cruelty of such an act shows the dark depths of evil that Bane has descended to. So, in terms of the methods they use to achieve their goals, Bane can be said to be the more wicked of the two, due to his deliberate emphasis on causing despair. Moving on, let's take a look at the potential impact of their actions. Now, admittedly, this one's quite obvious, as Bane clearly has the larger impact with the potential demise of all of Gotham's 6 million inhabitants after causing them to live in anarchy. Compared with the Joker, apart from the miscellaneous deaths he caused, the worst-case scenario would be the deaths of everyone on board the two ferries, and also the release of all the criminals that were incarcerated by Harvey Dent. The loss of Harvey Dent himself is staggering, since it deprives Gotham of the future benefit he could bring in further cleaning up the city. When we come down to it, Joker's impact is significantly lesser than Bane's, but you wouldn't be wrong to say that the Joker had a contributing hand to Bane's success, since if it were not for the Joker, Rachel would not have died, Batman would not have to take the blame for Harvey's fall, and Bruce would be in a much better mental and physical state to take on Bane at the start. But overall, in terms of impact, it's hard to put forth a case where Bane doesn't take the lead on this one. And now for the verdict. So the Joker has a more sinister motivation, while Bane is more sadistic and has an overall greater impact with his decimation of all of Gotham. But at the same time, Bane also has a more tragic background, one where he was born into it and had less propensity to choose the path he was set on. For the majority of his life, the harsh environment of the prison was all he knew, in contrast to the Joker, who made a more deliberate choice to embrace evil. Then there's also the issue of Bane's affection for Talia. Ultimately, Bane's evil is somewhat second-hand, as he is simply following the wishes of the only person he's emotionally inclined to. These factors offset Bane's evil quite a bit, but overall, I feel his crimes are still too severe to be deemed less evil than the Joker. Furthermore, if Bane were successful with Gotham and decides to further carry on the mission of the League of Shadows, there would be other cities that would be decimated at his hand as well. So overall, for all the reasons mentioned, I would place Bane as being more evil than the Joker, and as a bonus, I would place Ra's above Bane, making him the most evil villain of Nolan's trilogy.